So first, I want to spend a little bit of time learning about the Charity Organization Society, also known as COS. So the COS model was built again off of the London Charity Organization Society. And in the US, the COS was founded in about 1877, and it was developed to provide direct relief to individuals. The idea was that there was kind of a set of applied scientific practices that were done by individuals who would go working one-on-one with individuals to help diagnose and assess their individual needs and provide information and resources to help. So many of the people who did these kind of applied scientific practices were mostly wealthy white women who would visit homes and again work directly with people to talk with them, to figure out what they needed, and to figure out how to provide them with help. This model of individual practice, also known as friendly visiting, and the women were known as friendly visitors, really grew rapidly in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. And you started to see during this time period, as more people were involved as friendly visitors, you started to see more conferences and other kinds of organized support to help the friendly visitors. And this idea of helping train these friendly visitors to apply these scientific practices really became the basis of social work school. And in 1898, the first school, the New York School of Applied Philosophy, was developed to train individuals to do this kind of work, and it's often viewed as one of the earliest models of schools of social work in the U.S. Mary Richmond and Edward Devine are often credited with linking the COS practice to social work, as again, they saw the need to professionalize the friendly visitor model and help to further develop the practice. And just to say a word about Mary Richmond, so her name is one of the most associated with social work and COS. Her work, again, rooted in the ideas of COS, focused on supporting the systemic approach through casework. And this is a concept that you will have heard about in other parts of the MOOC, other than the MicroMaster MOOCs. And the idea of casework was really developed through Mary Richmond's work. And she wrote the book Social Diagnosis that, again, became a foundational text to help friendly visitors assessing individual experiences within their context and identifying sources of support. And her work is seen as a precursor to the person and environment ideas within social work. Again, the practice of case management and helping to support some of the key values that are still embedded within the Code of Ethics. And while there were many positive concepts that the Charity Organization Society brought forward, there are also many critiques. And so some of the main critiques that have been discussed within social work history and by social work scholars are the focus on the individual and not on the system. So in the Charity Organization Society practices, they tended to work one-on-one with individuals rather than thinking about the larger systematic root causes to issues or what was causing the broader challenges. And so some scholars also argue that COS was really focused then on fixing individuals, again, rather than these root causes of issues. And that, like we had talked about before, with the fact that there was kind of values and assumptions and biases built into the foundation of some of these social welfare practices, that many of the efforts for COS focused on supporting white women and white individuals and Western European immigrants, and there was very little support to African Americans or to other groups. And again, COS perpetuated the idea that the best way to create change was through individual work. So in contrast, kind of another major influencer to the beginnings of social work was the settlement house movement. So in contrast to COS, the settlement house movement focused on larger issues in neighborhood and community change. It was also built off of models from Europe, most notably Toynbee Hall in London. It also involved women, many, again, kind of wealthy white women, who would move into the community and work alongside and accompany people in the community to identify issues, organize programs, and work for change. Often settlement houses fought for changing conditions to address root causes such as education, sanitation, or other kinds of neighborhood infrastructure, rather than working with the individual as in the COS movement. The settlement house movement also worked to improve community through participatory approaches, meaning that they worked directly with the residents in the neighborhood to identify issues that mattered and to come up with community-driven solutions. Some of the most famous settlement houses include the Hull House in Chicago, Henry Street in New York, the University Settlement Houses in New York, and again, Chicago Commons in Chicago. It's important to note that the settlement house movement continues today and is often seen as the basis for community organizing, group work, and policy and advocacy practices within social work. It's also important to note that while there are many people who helped influence the settlement house movement in the U.S., and many names that can be attributed to it, Jane Addams is widely referred to as kind of the mother of social work and is often the person that's most associated with the development of the settlement house movement, especially her work in Chicago with the Hull House. So just like with the COS movement, the settlement house movement is, there have been many critiques to the settlement house movement. And again, while many think of this as the history of social work and remember them as the beginning of community social work, there are many critiques by scholars that they were, settlement houses were largely led by white upper middle class women, and that, again, as we've talked about before, that the practices were informed by that perspective and by implicit and explicit biases and assumptions. Some scholars talk about the sense that the settlement house effort was about assimilation and the idea of Americanizing immigration, and that immigrant culture was seen as different and less valued. And so built into that are a set of moral assumptions about what communities need. It's important to realize that many African Americans and Native Americans who came to urban cities in the U.S. were excluded from settlement houses. Those that did go to settlement houses sometimes experienced racism by the workers, and settlement houses were often seen as a form of social control and regulating behavior rather than support for these communities. So as a result, many African Americans created their own settlement houses to support the needs of African Americans and Native Americans. So the influence of the settlement house movement as a whole was on social work was large. Many of the early leaders in the movement went on to play critical roles in the field. The settlement house movement influenced the rise of new social work schools, including the University of Chicago. And the movement contributed leadership to the development of federal and national organizations that worked on social issues impacting the lives and well-being of families. And as noted, many settlement houses are still in existence today, playing vital roles in neighborhoods and communities. So the connection to modern social work. As noted, the COS movement and settlement house movement have a connection to and continue to live on in modern social work. And this slide shows kind of the major contributions. So COS has a foundation in the practice of casework and in individual or micro approaches to social work and the role of the social worker in assessment and treatment planning and person in the environment perspectives. And again, these are fundamental practices in today's U.S. social work practice. The settlement house movement has had influence on the role of social work in advocacy, community organization, and group engagement, and again continues to influence the approach to participatory practices and engaging community members in organizing in their own issues. Before we leave this section, while we've talked about the different kinds of contributions of social work and of historical perspectives to shaping how social work has developed, it is important to think about the critiques to how we even know about social work history today. And it's important to think that many scholars are talking about and critiquing the way that we come to learn about history. And so I think it's just important to note these challenges and critiques before moving forward. And so critical social work scholars challenge that most of what we know about social welfare history and most importantly about the history of social work has emerged through a largely white and Eurocentric and Western perspective. Many of these scholars are calling to challenge that perspective, to decenter the white women narrative, meaning to not only focus on the role of white women and not on others. to explore the role of global influences in the development of social work, and to examine and lift up Indigenous social welfare practices that existed in many communities but are largely excluded from what we know about social work history today. And to also to recognize the trauma, oppression, racism, and exclusion that was present in the foundations of social work history and in social welfare history, and how those traumas and oppressions and exclusions continue to impact people's experiences with social work today. So it's important as you examine the rest of this module and other resources to ask critical questions about history. From what lens was this information written? Whose perspective? Whose voice is not included? And also for you to think about your own history, your lens, and what perspective you would add. And we encourage you to be thinking about this as you explore the rest of the module. And then in the remaining parts of this module, we're going to ask you to engage with exploring a historical timeline, exploring further issues of rights and exclusion, being able to look through key leaders in social work and social welfare history, and then to add your own contributions to helping us think through history as it continues to evolve.